Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the Horror Master YouTube channel. Welcome back to day number 19. 19. Ugh. Like I said, my sanity's been going crazy with each video, but thank you everyone for keep going along with this series. And for episode 19, like I mentioned in my previous before, we're gonna be tackling a franchise that a lot of people don't even think it's even a horror franchise. Yeah, a lot of people don't even think that. And for episode 19, we're gonna be tackling all of the Hannibal Lecter films. Yeah, who would have thought a Hannibal Lecter being a horror franchise? Who would have thought? Yeah, but in this franchise, we have five films we're gonna be talking about. I am excluding, of course, the TV series Hannibal and of course Clarice, which they're both great in their own respective ways, but I'm only focusing on the films. But of course, I mean, it's Hannibal. If you haven't seen any of these films, you know who Hannibal Lecter is. Hannibal Lecter is. I mean, it's been meme, one of the most iconic and recent horror icons in recent history in the 90s and all that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But for this episode, we're gonna be talking about all the Hannibal Lecter films. Of course, we have five films that we're gonna be tackling. So enough jibber jabbering. Let's get into the ranking mode. So at number five, at the bottom of the barrel, and unfortunately I had to put this film on the very bottom. I have Hannibal Rising. Now, Hannibal Rising is one of those films that gets a lot of shit for trying to explain how Hannibal Lecter became Hannibal Lecter, which, when it comes to those origin films and how a serial killer became became what he eventually became, it's kind of a thing that, it it works and it doesn't work depending on the situation. For example, in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when they try to do how the chicks how he became crazy and all that, it doesn't work at times. And with Hannibal Rising, I believe that it kind of did try try its best to actually become what it is. Of course, Gaps Util, I think that's his name. Forgive me my pronunciation. God rest his soul. He tried his best to portray Hannibal Lecter as much as he can. Of course, you know he had so much of a big shoes to fill after Anthony Hawkins portrayed Hannibal Lecter so perfectly delightful. That's the best way I can say it. But as an origins film, I do see why people trying to say it's not the greatest, because of course it kind of humanizes the character, which sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Of course, we find out that Hannibal became Hannibal because of revenge, trying to murder and eventually eat all the men who ate his sisters around World War II and all that. So the psyche of Hannibal and how eventually became this monster upon the world. It's kind of fascinating to me, but for those reasons, unfortunately, Hannibal Rising is at my number five. At number four, we have Manhunter. Yeah, a film that a lot of people don't think it's actually a Hannibal Lecter quote unquote film, which actually it is a Hannibal Lecter film. Pretty much, this is Red Dragon before Red Dragon was gonna become Red Dragon. Of course, this film was released in the 80s, I want to say 85, 86, around there. So, like I said, basically they took it. Had Manhunter was the film that if you want to read, if you have read the book, which if you have not read any of the Hannibal books, I suggest you ought to read them. They're pretty good. I've read them, not all of them, but a part of it's for myself. But Manhunter is a film that if you want to stick to more into the book, this is your film. If you're more of a person who likes to read books and they make a film adaptation and you want that movie to be as close as the book, this is your movie. If you don't, of course, there's Red Dragon we're talking about it a bit, but Manhunter, for what it is, like I said, a proto Red Dragon, no, even a proto Hannibal Lecter, kind of giving the grounds for eventually Anthony Hawkins eventually being cast as Hannibal Lecter in, of course, Silence of the Lambs, and of course portraying his Oscar-winning performance. But not only that, but of course, the person who plays Hannibal in this film has to be. I'm trying to remember his name at the top of my head. Brian Cox, who tried his best to portray Hannibal Lecter. Of course, at the time, that was his Hannibal Lecter, his version Hannibal Lecter, which at the time it was almost at point. But again, until Anthony Hawkins took over the role in Silence of the Lambs, made it even more famous. But like I said, a bit more of a slower film. if you like those kind of films. Again, it's a good thriller. But again, 80s thrillers weren't really the thing that I'm aware of. Of course, there's maybe some other exceptions. I'm forgetting at the top of my head. But for a film in the 80s about Hannibal Lecter, it's a pretty good film. So don't sleep on this film. Actually, I slept on this film years ago, but onto redoing this episode, I actually watched it, and it's a quite enjoyable film. So if you not see the Manhunter film, I suggest y'all go watch it. It's worth the watch. And number three, we have Hannibal. This is the sequel to Silence of the Lambs. So I remember this film when I think I began to saw this film. I was probably 15 years old, if I remember correctly. I honestly thought when Silence of the Lambs, that one film, I thought it was that's it. They weren't gonna make any other films. But again, I didn't know back then they made sequels and prequels and the TV shows later down the road. But with Hannibal, the thing that a lot of people criticize, and it's something that I've criticized myself as well, the fact that Judy Foster didn't come back and play Clarice in the film is one of those things that a lot of people give a lot of shit for this film. Which give it a rest, guys. I mean, I know she played that role to almost to the team or to perfection as much as you can. But with Hannibal, the film, it has some pretty good intense some very good intense moments. Of course, when him and Clarice are in dinner, and he's getting, I think one of the securities or one of the guys opens up his skull and starts picking his brain and starts to eat him. And it's kind of weird to think that a movie like that, you know, it's kind of been forgotten for a lot of people. But like I said, Julia Moore tried her best to portray Clarice as much as she could. But then again, then also we have this plot line about trying to remember his name, the fucking trying to remember his name, the guy who's been burned, trying to remember his name. How, well, for whatever his name is, the character, how he kind of had this romanticized yet cannibalistic relationship with Hannibal. So that was kind of intriguing. They kind of add that, which caught me off guard at first, but then as we watched the film later on, we kind of realized why they kind of put it in the film. I think it worked, to be honest. It's one of those films that with the Hannibal franchise that I once in a blue moon might go back and forth to watch it, just to revisit those moments in the film. And like I said, a lot of people shit on this film for obvious reasons, which that's your opinion. But it's like assholes, we all have opinions. But to me, Hannibal respectively sits at my number three. At number two, we have Red Dragon. Now, this is the first prequel of the Hannibal Lecter franchise. Like I said, like I mentioned before with Manhunter, if you wanted a film that's close to the book, Manhunter is your film. If you wanted a film that takes liberty but keeps kind of some elements of the book, Red Dragon is your film. Like I said, everything about this film had that Silence of the Lambs kind of vibe. Pretty much they took what the Silence in the Lab they did in Silence of the Lambs and trying to put that in the Red Dragon as a prequel to the Silence of the Lambs. And in my opinion, it kind of worked. I mean, the suspense is there, the thrillers are there. I think the castings, of course, Anthony Hopkins returning back as Hannibal Lecter. I mean, there was no other person. You had to bring him. I mean, of course, you had to bring Hannibal Lecter back as Hannibal Lecter. But regardless, it's a film that as the years have gone by, I've heard people more talk about it being better than it was. I mean, I've heard people again. I was still a kid when this film was released, so I've talked to older people than myself that when Red Dragon came out, they thought it was the shit. But as the years went on, they began to appreciate how much of a great film it is because it kind of takes, like I mentioned before, those Silence of the Lambs elements, combining those with more stuff, more suspense, more of a thriller, mix it up together. You get this the Red Dragon, which it's a film that I've revisited oftenly more than the previous ones I've talked about. So for those reasons, Red Dragon is at my number two. And of course, the number one, it's obvious which was the number one. It's Silence of the Lambs. When you have Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs. That film has been memed, has been in pop culture so many times. You have no idea the amount of memes. You have the amount of references. I mean, hell, when you have a character, not to mention Buffalo Bill. I mean, when you have a character like Buffalo Bill, who is the antagonist of the film, and you have Hannibal Lecter, who is kind of a protagonist, and he's basically almost an anti-hero, but still kind of keeping more of the villainous side of him. When you combine all that and the story and all that about Buffalo Bill, which to this day, every time I see Silence of the Lambs, I always have that daunting image of trying to remember who played Buffalo Bill. Fuck, can't remember his fucking the guy who played Buffalo Bill when he's dancing naked while Goodbye Horses is playing on the background, which I fucking dig that song a lot. But every time I listen to that song, that image of Buffalo Bill just is stuck in my brain. Not only that, but for this film to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, which was I think in 96, 97. I mean, I don't remember which this film came out, but for it to win the Academy Award for Best Picture says a lot of how much this film impacted, the cinema, the cinema at those times. Because actually, no, it was in 91. I remember now, it was released in 91 to win the Academy Award, probably for 91 or 92. And I remember which Academy Award was. To have that kind of impact translate to 30 years later, that we had, two prequels. Two prequels, a sequel, two TV shows, Funko Pops made, references made. Of course, you see it in The Simpsons. You see it in memes. You see anybody quoting, of course, "Hello, Clarice," or "It's put the lotion on, skin out, gets the hose again. Put the fucking lotion in the basket." Everything about it, but of course, when everything in Hannibal Lecter, that iconic scene when he's in his cell, standing, talking to Clarice, and then of course they're dialoguing. Of course, he brings out the scene, of course, with a fancy Bahamas and a nice Chianti. That scene has always been stuck in my mind for so many years. And like I said, Hannibal Lecter has becoming more beloved horror icon, even though he's not much of a stabby kind of person. It's more of a, he's gonna fucking eat you, a cannibal pretty much. And the way that Anthony Hawkins brought that character to life, I mean, nobody has been able to portray it. I mean, of course, the Hannibal series is still good, but it's still, I mean, it's Anthony Hawkins as Hannibal Lecter. What's like the perfect match made in heaven or the perfect match made in hell? It's kind of like Freddy Krueger portrayed by Robert Englund, or Brad Dourif voicing Chucky, or shit, I'm blanking right now. I'm thinking of another scenario. Or outside of horror, it's kind of like, you know, Robert Downey Jr. playing Iron Man. It's they go together. You can't talk one without the other. Same thing with, of course, Anthony Hawkins as Hannibal Lecter. And this film has become one of the most psychological yet thrilling films in the horror genre, to the point that it has been in so many top 10 lists, top 20 lists of all time. Gets to show you that how much of a film has impacted on horror. Like I said before, a lot of sequels, couple of prequels, Funko Pops, TV shows, has been in so many in pop culture. It's a phenomenon that this film has been able to stand the test of time, and will stand the test of time after we're all dead and gone, and you see just Keith Richards with 3 cockroaches. So for those reasons, Silence of the Lambs is at my number one. And that does it for this video, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this rank 'em all. Like I said, this was a really fun rank 'em all to do. Like I said, all the rank 'em alls I've been doing have been a lot of fun. And have you guys have really been enjoying this rank 'em alls. If you've gone back to see all the horror films that I've talked about, for good or for worse, depending on your perspective. But again, thank you guys for watching on this rank 'em alls. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video for episode number 20. Jesus Christ. For episode 20, we're going to do a franchise that, again, a lot of people don't really talk about as often, only the hardcore horror fans. We're going to be tackling the entire Puppet Master franchise. Another one of those beloved franchises that has some great films, has some okay films, and has some films that I'm like, what the fuck did I just see? But regardless of that, that's tomorrow's video. But like I mentioned before, if you go follow me on my Instagram, follow me on my Twitter, share the videos, like guys, like, comment, subscribe, all the shebang. Stay safe, everyone, and until next time, stay metal.